Do you know what, the National Capital Region, including Northern Virginia, is classified as a non-attainment region in terms of air pollution. Do you know what percentage of that air pollution is migrating pollution from coal-fired power plants?
I do not.
Would it surprise you to learn that about a third of the air pollution in this region is attributed to those migrating pollution sources from coal-fired power plants not in this region?
Well, I certainly wouldn't expect everything we deal with in this region to have started here. So I grant you that. But the specific numbers I can't really suggest.
But certainly as the Attorney General of Virginia, representing, as you point out, all of Virginia, you could understand some of the anxiety and concern in the northern part of the state with respect to pollution caused by coal-fired power plants.
I don't think that concern is quarantined to Northern Virginia. I think it's shared across Virginia.
Point well taken.
What is additionally shared is just a desire for balance to be achieved as we gradually try to keep our air cleaner and improve the standard of living in this country.
Mr. Attorney General, the proposition here is that should this regulation go into effect, it would have devastating effect both on sources of electricity and on jobs. In 1990, with the Clean Air Act amendments, similar arguments were made. Do you know what happened to the price of electricity in the Commonwealth of Virginia in the intervening?
Back in 1990? No.
No, in the intervening 21 years. Did it go up or down?
I can speak to you back through the last decade or so, but I can't go back to 1990.
Would it surprise you to learn that actually electricity rates in the Commonwealth of Virginia in that time period have actually fallen by 35.6%?
Would not entirely surprise me.
Well, does that not call into question perhaps then the claims that in this particular case that won't work, and in fact electricity rates are going to go up?
Well,
given the experience we've had in the last 21 years, why should we put credence in such an argument?
Certainly, it would be a lot easier to analyze that argument if there were more than 134 days to look at 960,000 comments, presumably not all of which are substantive, but if you just compare them to other rules. I mean, you all had your own here from this committee. I would look at some others, like the chemical recovery combustion was 2.5 years, reciprocating internal combustion engine 1.5 years, for cement, the Portland cement manufacturing.
Mr. Cuccinelli.
We're looking at 4.5 months to consider the very questions you all are lobbying this way with assumed answers.
Mr. Cuccinelli, unfortunately my time is limited, but certainly the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 were far more sweeping than what's in front of us now. What happened to electricity rates, for example, in other coal-fired power states with coal-fired power plants? And I'll list them: West Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, and Alabama. Are their electricity rates in the intervening 21 years since that sweeping set of amendments, are they higher or lower relative to 1990?
I don't study other states' electricity specifically. I study the national and compare it to Virginia, unless something borders Virginia and we have a rate case where that's relevant.
Would it surprise you to learn they're also cheaper?
No, I wouldn't be surprised either way, not knowing it. So,
Mr. Cuccinelli, correct me if I'm wrong, I was under the impression that, for example, on the Health Care Reform Act, the Affordable Health Care Act, you were an advocate for nullification. You supported legislation. You supported legislation in the General Assembly of Virginia that made universal mandates illegal in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Is that not correct?
Nullification is an incorrect term, and it suggests you don't know history. Nullification is when a state says, we're not going to obey your Federal law. That isn't what happened in Virginia. The General Assembly, on a bipartisan basis, passed a law. 2 weeks later, the President signed PPACA, and those two were in conflict. And as our constitutional structure provides, we went to court to resolve the disputes of authority related to those two laws. That is not nullification, Congressman.
Would you stop the clock? If the gentleman would suspend.
Yes.
General Cuccinelli, you can answer any question you choose to answer. However, you are only bound to answer questions that are within the germaneness of the subject for which you were brought here. You may continue.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Of course.
The purpose of my question was not to focus on health care. It was I wanted to give the opportunity to the Attorney General to explain his position, because my question has to do with whether he, if you don't like nullification, then I'll call it preemption. does the Commonwealth of Virginia have a similar preemption right, if you don't want to use the word nullification, with respect to this regulation in your view as the Attorney General of Virginia?
I think the Commerce Clause very clearly gives the Congress and therefore the Federal Government the broad power to address something like pollution across State lines, whereas if you compare that to the health care example, ordering a particular individual to go buy a product, not regulating them once they are in commerce, but ordering them into commerce is a completely different comparison. So I have no constitutional complaints with what is going on in terms of the exercise of Federal authority here. My concerns are policy concerns and legal process concerns. And
so you see the two as different?
Processes, oh, absolutely. We put those processes in place to protect not only the rights, but to achieve the best policy outcomes. And I know, regardless of the opinions here, everyone here would like to achieve the best possible outcomes for this country. I think that we're more likely to do that if we actually take a legitimate amount of time to consider the material that's now before us that is simply, it's not humanly possible to consider all the comments that are now before us on this rule in the incredibly short time frame.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Now